All right. We are live from the compound. I'm here with Dana Mattioli. Dana is an investigative journalist and senior reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Dana, say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
All right. Dana is a senior reporter, but I think the thing that is most interesting about the work that you're doing is the coverage universe. You're talking about, you're not just reporting, you're kind of putting together this bigger story about all of the companies that matter the most to investors right now. These are the largest market cap. These are the most exciting headline-generating businesses, and you're extremely well-sourced. You've done deep dives into companies like Amazon for years. You have a Pulitzer Prize. Do I have that right?
Yeah, we got one last week as part of a team.
Okay. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And your book, The Everything War, which we're going to talk more about. John, put that graphic down. I want to show people the real thing. This is the actual. It's so good. I can't stop reading it. I'm about halfway through it, as I told you. But it really tells the story of one of these gigantic technology companies and kind of how it started and how it got to where it is. It's the story of Amazon, of course. But before we talk about that, I just want to kind of get into some of your recent reporting on some of these companies, because we talk about this stuff from an investing perspective, and you're looking at this stuff as kind of like a larger story of how it impacts the whole world, how these companies are impacting the whole world. What is it at this moment right now that you think is most interesting about the tech giants now that they seem to be playing along with the administration and really heavily impacted by a lot of political issues like trade that maybe 10 years ago it wouldn't have been as impactful, but now they're like right at the center of all of this stuff?
I just find it remarkable, the giant 180s we've seen almost all of the tech titans do.
Yeah.
And I think at their core, these are really pragmatic people. And there's a lot of downside if this goes the way of Trump 1.0, where they make enemies. You know, they lived through that. Some of them with really to bad effect. If you think about Amazon being just like castrated by the administration. So I think they've really learned their lesson. And, you know, we've chronicled how they've bent the knee in lots of different ways. And, you know, I think it's too soon to tell if they're getting the payoff that they want there, but they're definitely not getting, you know, beat up like they were the first term.
When you see at the inauguration, you see them in front row seats. Obviously Elon Musk, but then you see Mark Zuckerberg, and then you see Jeff Bezos, and they're all kind of lined up, Satya. And look, it's not weird for captains of industry to be at a presidential inauguration. We've seen that in every era. But I guess like the question is, did they ever really believe in like the liberal ideology, or was that also a shortcut? Was that also expedience to do all the DEI stuff that they were doing and just kind of like go along to get along? But in the end, it's just about the competitive position of the business, and whoever seems to be in power, whether it's the left, the right, the liberals, the conservatives, it's just about like, hey, let me just make sure that I'm in the good graces of the people that are currently in power. What do you think is the thought process there?
I think at the core, many of these tech CEOs are more libertarian.
Okay.
So they, you know, more socially, they lean left. They're more conservative fiscally. They believe in like open markets and the likes. And what's fascinating to me is they had a horrible relationship with the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Like he was really tough on them. He didn't want to take meetings. He did things that really clamped their success. And they have very liberal worker bases, right? So that's something they also have to think about when they're in the political realm. You know, I just think this time they really spent a lot of time game planning with their public policy offices, taking a look at Trump 1.0, taking a look at, you know, the Biden administration maybe going too far in certain things that they were really pushed away from. You know, I had a big story last summer about Elon Musk's political evolution, which is just, it was a wild story. He was all in on the Democrats for the longest time. If you look at his businesses, they're about climate change. They're about reversing climate change, right? He had said openly that he voted for Obama. He really wanted to be part of the Democratic Party, but he felt pushed out.
Yeah.
Biden spurned him. He would not mention him when talking about these big electric vehicle summits, even though they make the vast preponderance of electric vehicles in the US. And when I speak to some of these CEOs in private and some of the senior leaders at these tech companies, there's that sentiment that they felt a little bit pushed out of the Democratic Party in some ways.
This is like the funniest thing is like they did this electric vehicle summit. Elon Musk is the most important figure and always will be in the history of the electric vehicle revolution, however far it goes, whether we ever see it be 10 or 20% of automobiles, like however long this goes, you cannot say that we would even have electric vehicles if not for Elon Musk. And then they have this summit and they don't invite him because he's anti-union.
Exactly. And then he credits Mary Barra for electrifying the whole industry when they had like the pittance of the market share in EVs and stuff like that. There were some own goals that really did backfire here with the tech titans. And you've seen this broader shift in the Valley in a way that I've never seen, at the Journal. I've been at the Journal for 19 years. I haven't seen these CEOs and companies move right like I did this last election cycle.
Yeah. So I think what's really interesting about that is then the union leadership are pro-Biden because Biden is actually doing the things for the unions that would help them. But the union membership is almost universally Trump in some of these cases. And so it's just it's a weird thing to have pushed out somebody like an Elon Musk because it's what the unions are telling you to do. And then you don't even really have the support of the rank and file union people in the auto industry.
That's right.
Okay. So now we're in this situation where Silicon Valley and the companies in your coverage universe, Dana, are playing along with the administration. In some cases, some of the people are taking active roles in the administration. And it seems like it's a kinder, gentler FTC. Seems like it may be a kinder, gentler IRS. Like a lot of the deregulation and the hopes about like less holding back of big business, but not all of them. Like they're not getting everything they want. And you had a story about Zuckerberg thinking that Trump might have his back in settling a suit. Tell us a little bit about what your reporting told you there.
Sure. I mean, Zuckerberg has done a lot of legwork to try to ingratiate himself to Donald Trump and his administration. This was a CEO, if you remember, that Trump said that maybe he should put in prison for past offenses. And so he was really on the outs with this administration and disliked because of, banning Trump from Facebook and Instagram after the insurrection and other things that, people around Trump found really odious. So once it becomes clear that Trump is going to win the election, Zuckerberg really makes a lot of efforts here. He not only does the requisite $1 million donation to the inaugural fund that we saw all of them do after that, right? That was like a big move. He goes to the
Mar-a-Lago visit.
Goes to Mar-a-Lago, right? And has dinner with Trump and gives him this gift of these new sunglasses that Facebook is making. But he also settled a $25 million lawsuit with Trump that many lawyers thought is a frivolous lawsuit that did not need to be settled.
Yeah.
So he does a lot of things along those lines, and he feels good. He feels good that maybe his antitrust problem is going to go away. And it comes time for this big meta lawsuit to finally play out in public, to go to trial. And he also lobbies Trump's team personally to, maybe take their foot off the gas here. And it just does not work. I don't know if it is a kinder, gentler FTC, to be honest.
Okay.
Andrew Ferguson has spoken very critically. He's the chair of the FTC, very critically about big tech. And some of the things he's done have been sort of in step with former chair Lina Khan. Not very conservative in nature in some ways. And behind the scenes, Zuck tried to settle with the FTC, and he made a very small offer to them. He said, I can't remember what the first offer was. It was like a pittance. And the FTC said, you're too far away from where we want to be. We're thinking this should be a $30 billion settlement, like the biggest in history. And then Zuckerberg comes back with another offer. I think it was around $1 billion. And they said it's $18 billion or we have no deal. And it's in trial. So that it definitely has not worked for him in that way.
Zuckerberg recently bought a big piece of real estate in Washington, D.C. Nobody would do that unless they had a business reason that they felt that they would be spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C.
And
so
it's almost the exact price as what Bezos paid a few years ago.
That's right. Bezos also bought a
$23 million.
That's right. Okay. So we're now at the point. I guess we're through the first 100 days of the administration. The stocks themselves are trading okay, especially given all the chaos from the trade war. Today is a great day. We're recording this on Monday because it looks like most of the tariffs that we had been worried about since early April have come off. You're seeing the Amazons, the Teslas, the Metas, they're all up huge on the day. But even beside that, these stocks have been doing okay this year because maybe it's not quite a kinder, gentler FTC, but it does appear that these companies can do business in a way that maybe it looked like the Biden administration, if we had another version of that, or if we had Kamala Harris, it might be a little bit tougher. So I think like some of the pressure feels like it's come off, even for Bezos, who is not Trump's best friend.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was looking at Amazon's market cap today. It's back up to 2.2 trillion.
Yeah.
Right. So it's doing really well. And there's been some measures that could be very helpful for Amazon. I mean, they're very exposed to the tariff situation. So the contours of a deal that was struck today with China is really helpful for a company like Amazon. The Trump administration is also making changes to things like the Consumer Protection Bureau, which oversees dangerous products. There's a big case with Amazon there. If that were to be dismantled or, other things happen to it, that could help Amazon too. So there are things in the margins that could definitely help these giants.
So I want to talk about Amazon. Just let's give people a little bit of background. So you effectively became the Amazon reporter for the Wall Street Journal. So did you ask for that, or did they say, this is your beat? We want you to, this is now one of the most important companies in the world. We want you to focus and go deep into what's happening at Amazon. How did that come about?
I totally asked for it.
Okay.
I was the Wall Street Journal's mergers and acquisitions reporter for 6 years. I loved that beat. I spoke to a lot of investors in that time. And basically my whole job was to break which companies were buying other companies. And I got burnt out because it's like an exhausting beat. You work every weekend, but I loved it so much. And I couldn't think of like anything as exciting as M&A when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, except for Amazon. Because toward the end of that beat, I started seeing companies doing really dumb mergers that made really no sense, that were not creating shareholder value out of a position of fear. They were worried about Amazon coming into the healthcare space or the industrial space or the logistics space and like eating their lunch. So they were trying to Amazon proof their businesses.
Right.
And I just thought like this was the most feared company in corporate America. It's a giant black box by design.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get into that black box. So I pitched this beat to my then editor-in-chief, Matt Murray, and the head of business at the Wall Street Journal, and said, I want to get inside the black box. And they said, if you think you could do it, then do it. So
well, you've got this really great passage that illustrates that idea. So Amazon starts with books because famously they're the most cost-effective thing to ship. Based on its size, what its weight is going to be. It's just cardboard and pages, and it's easy to package. It's an easy place to start. It's not just books for the sake of books. It's a prototype. This is you on July 13th, 1999, after Capelli. Is that Jerry Capelli? Who?
I can't remember his first name.
After Capelli sent his press release announcing that Amazon would expand into selling toys and electronics, the phones began ringing off the hook. Wall Street loved Amazon's expansion, rinse and repeat approach. With each new category it expanded in, Amazon chose growth over profits. Those gains came at the expense of its rivals. It was seen as a zero-sum game. For every item that Amazon sold in the new categories it entered, it meant a loss from a physical store that merchandised that item. So like they would just announce, oh, now we're doing toys. Now we're doing CDs. Now we're doing, right? They would put a survey out to their customers. What else do you want us to sell? Mm-hmm. People would say auto parts. Okay, great. We're doing auto parts. And every time they did that, stock price would go up 5%, 10%. And that's the rinse and repeat aspect to this. So you're looking at companies that are starting to announce mergers. It's like, well, what's the purpose of this? We need to get big enough so that when Amazon comes our way, we're ready.
To fend them off. It's totally a defensive play.
Okay. So I find that fascinating because it's like kind of still in effect. Like Amazon is now running TV commercials for telehealth. And effectively, this is an area where one of my physicians was like going into they would say, all right, we're going to do X number of telehealth appointments now going forward because people's habits changed during the pandemic. And we recognize that. And there are people who want a doctor's visit, but they don't want to come here. Okay, we're now going to offer that. Okay, that sounded great. And then it's like, well, Amazon is now in that business too. So it might not have been the best investment that you could have made.
I used to go to One Medical and then Amazon bought it. And I was in the middle of like writing this book. I had to find a new doctor. I mean, their tentacles are just everywhere. I think everyone just equates them with an online retailer. And they're the biggest. 40% of everything sold online in the US is on Amazon. But they're almost impossible to avoid. They're a utility at this point. I mean, even if you want to boycott them, it's really, really hard.
Right. So as a shareholder, I definitely don't want people to boycott them. A lot of the things that they've done are, if you look at these things from a shareholder perspective, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to maximize profit, which is profits weren't important in the early stages. They would have argued back then, no, we're maximizing growth, profits later, and it sort of worked. Then you look at the share price of Walgreens, CVS. Like this is clearly the next to me, when I look at CVS, Walgreens, I experience the stores in person. I think of Walden Books and I think of Borders. Is that the way it looks to you from your reporting?
It's funny you bring those two up. You probably haven't gotten to it yet in the book, but there's a chapter about CVS and Aetna doing that catastrophic M&A deal. Insane deal. Because of Amazon. They would speak about it in every boardroom meeting. They were so nervous about Amazon getting into the healthcare space that they do this $69 billion deal, biggest in their history, to insulate themselves. And it's just gone haywire. If you look at the market value of CVS Aetna today, it's way less than the market value if you would just add up both companies' market values before they combined.
Yeah.
And it's like a cautionary tale. And I do think that these companies have not figured out the proper way to Amazon proof. And a lot of them are, circling bankruptcy or feel like relics from the past that are just not going to be around for the next generation.
Dana, do you have a sense of why Amazon has so far avoided things like retail brokerage, insurance? I know there was this joint effort with improbably Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan, and Amazon to figure out healthcare. And healthcare is so ridiculous that within 2 years they just said, forget it.
That's right.
But they haven't really gone into life insurance, for example. And like from my perspective, it just seems so obvious. There's no reason why people wouldn't buy a life insurance policy from Amazon. So there must be something about certain financial businesses or maybe healthcare related businesses where they study it internally or they test some things out and they just say, this is not a great idea. Do you think those are purely financial calculations, or is there something else that maybe keeps them away from doing those things?
They're not afraid of complicated areas, but I think, they do weigh the regulatory environment of certain areas. And, life insurance, financials could be a bit thorny.
Yeah.
Interestingly, they have not shied away from healthcare. It's the biggest area of, GDP spending like in the country. It's too big to ignore.
Health insurance, but not healthcare itself.
Correct. They've been in healthcare. And that's like a big goal of the current CEO, Andy Jassy. And that's like one area where they've actually had some like big misses. You mentioned Haven, this Warren Buffett, Jamie Dimon, Jeff Bezos initiative that cratered.
What do you think happened there? They just it wasn't as exciting as when they started to dig into the details, or nobody had the time to really focus on it?
Oh, I just think it was massively complicated. I think they underestimated how complicated it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
when you think about Andy Jassy and his tenure as CEO, I think, all right, so let me actually back up. One of the things I think people have gotten wrong on Andy Jassy was that he was like sort of like I don't want to say a fresh start, but like kind of like, all right, let's give the ball to somebody else. He had been with Jeff since extremely early in everything Amazon's done. He was kind of the guy in the room who Jeff would look at and say, what do you think just happened when they walked out of a meeting? And I think that was underestimated. So I think people looked at it like, yeah, it's a fresh start. But I always looked at it as like, oh, this is pretty awesome, actually, because this is somebody that knows the way Jeff would think about every twist and turn better than anyone else on earth. What was your impression when they made him the CEO and how he's done so far in the couple of years that he's been running the show?
I totally agree with you. He started at the company like a few weeks before they IPO'd in the 90s. Okay.
Yeah.
He was Jeff's technical advisor in every meeting with him. This was not like a totally new start. This is like a proxy for Jeff.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, right? So and he embodies the culture. He helped create the culture of the company, which is like a very important thing at Amazon, for better or worse. The book gets into a lot of the toxic behaviors at Amazon because of that. So I think, you see a continuation of some of the things that Jeff would have done, but then you see him making his mark in other areas. Like I said, healthcare is a big initiative for Andy in a way that I don't think it was for Jeff in the same way. There's some areas where they diverge a bit, but I think this is like very much about continuity.
Okay. What's the state of the U.S. government versus Amazon, the various different fronts that they may or may not be fighting regulators on? Where does it stand right now for shareholders and investors who can't quite keep up with all the different conflicts and concerns that exist right now?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. The one area that Jeff and Andy really differ a lot is their approach to Washington, D.C. For most of Jeff's tenure, he ignored Washington, D.C. He made some really high-profile missteps. He did not want to engage in a way that most big companies did. And he actually offended a lot of people, okay? Andy is very diplomatic. When he first got into the office of CEO, he made a point to go to D.C. and meet with Congress people, meet with the people who are now saying that the company's a monopoly. Because in 2023, the Federal Trade Commission under Lina Khan filed a lawsuit against Amazon, calling them an illegal monopoly, and that goes to trial next year. And if you read the case closely, which I have, there's language in there that could mean that the company gets broken up.
Yeah.
This is a very serious lawsuit.
Yeah.
And so this is, this an area that they do take very seriously now. It's an area that Andy takes very seriously that Jeff might not have. And he's, done a lot of damage control to clean up some of the messes that the company had made for itself. The third part of the book gets into how badly Amazon and Jeff mismanaged Washington, D.C.
You think they should have been more political all along and have made allies, like had planted better seeds?
Not only that, they should have just avoided pissing everyone off. I mean, they made so many enemies on the Hill from both parties. This became like the one thing that the Democrats and the Republicans could agree on was that this is a monopoly and maybe should be broken up and that they're doing illegal things.
Okay. So that's where I want to go next. One of the things that you get into very early on is the origins of why Lina Khan is at the FTC to begin with. She basically looked at this decision that had been made where they were going to treat monopoly as something where, like, if it's in the best interest of consumers, they're going to be easier on it. Mm-hmm. And if it's anti-consumer, then they're going to be tougher. The problem with that is Amazon is incredible for consumers. Amazon is a very difficult competitor for other businesses, but the consumers are not harmed. And so if that was the standard that they were looking at Amazon along those lines, it was going to be really hard to go after them. People said, wait a minute, I get my stuff faster, I get it cheaper, there are multiple merchants on the site competing with each other to undersell. This is great. Why are you going after Amazon? I love Amazon. Mm-hmm. So that kind of has enabled them to get as far as they have without a major challenge like the one that they currently face. That's what's been flipped on its head. It's not the antitrust rules, it's the interpretation of the antitrust rules. Do I have that right?
Yeah, you do. And I would say with one caveat, in the early days, Amazon did undercut everyone on prices so it could build its monopoly, so that it could put Sears out of business and they could put Circuit City out of business. And it didn't have to worry about profits, right? So it could
Yeah.
really offer low prices. And then the whole retail landscape is this graveyard of former retailers that it used to compete against.
Yes.
It has benefited from this perception that it has the lowest prices for years after that's actually been true.
Being pro-consumer. That was
Correct.
the vibe.
That it was
Right.
low prices, lower than everyone else. Now, what's really fascinating is now that they have this retail graveyard, what they've done is they've been able to extract tons of fees from all those third-party sellers on the website.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, they used to take 19 cents on the dollar from someone selling something on Amazon. Today, that's 45 cents on the dollar. So those sellers have had to raise their prices on Amazon, so we all pay more to buy those prices so that they have some sort of margin. And that gets concealed when you think about Amazon, and that's what the FTC calls out.
Okay.
This type of behavior is raising prices and creating this like inflationary world.
So the third party sellers thing, you've got a section of book where you talk about at first they try to launch an eBay clone.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is nobody shows up for it. Turns out people just like going to eBay, and eBay is doing it better. And they had already reached this like nucleus of buyers and sellers, where it was really hard to like justify a reason for there to be a second one. But they pivot that effort into marketplace, which is for the first time, not only can you buy from Amazon, but you can buy from a third party who may even be competing with Amazon itself on Amazon. Consumers love it. It opens up this whole new world of more sellers selling more things. And I think it's good for Amazon because they don't have to hold the inventory, but they can satisfy the transaction. Okay, so that becomes really important to Amazon.
It's like the happiest mistake because it opens the doors
Right.
for all these sellers, right? It's like the best mistake you can make.
Right. But the sellers are like frogs hopping into a pot of water that's not yet boiling.
Yeah.
Because they give up their own e-commerce ambitions of building their own sites, their own marketplaces. They just say, you know what? I could just sell tons of stuff right there. All the customers are there.
And
so that's sort of what happens on one side. The other side is, Amazon without having to hold inventory, but having every SKU you could possibly buy. You have those monoline retailers like your linens and things you talk about in the book. It's like, how could we possibly justify being a standalone operator? Because all right. So that's kind of how that all plays out. But again, most of it is to the benefit of the consumer. So this suit, the current suit, is really more about competing businesses. And now these competing businesses are like, we can't even make money on this side. Like it was one thing when we could make money. We can't make money at all.
Yeah, it's actually not even about competing businesses. It's about them kind of extorting their third-party sellers. And it actually is, it is a standard consumer welfare lawsuit about prices being raised for customers, which is interesting because the FTC had moved away from that under Lena Khan, but this is sort of her white whale. And I think this is more of a carefully constructed lawsuit.
Okay. Amazon would say, we tried it the other way. We let third-party sellers handle their own shipping and logistics, and it was a customer service nightmare. And so these are Amazon customers, and the only way to do this business and preserve our reputation as the best place to buy things online is to force these third-party sellers, or not force, persuade these third-party sellers to use us for shipping and fulfillment. There is some merit to that argument to anyone that's ever attempted an e-commerce transaction with somebody other than Amazon. Amazon's just better at getting the thing to your door.
Sure. I mean, it's the biggest logistic network in the US, bigger than UPS and FedEx, right?
Yeah.
They're very good at shipping. But, I think a lot of those sellers would say like they are being forced to use Amazon logistics, because then if you're not, you can't be on Amazon Prime, and that's where 200 million members are, right? So it's this pay-to-play atmosphere, they would say.
Right. So I guess the court is going to have to look at what's in the best interest. So it's tricky because I could see both arguments. If Amazon's logistics are literally the best version for the consumer, you can sort of understand why they would charge the third-party sellers more to be able to have access to it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where they come up, what they come up with on remedies. You could almost see them making a world where Amazon Logistics has to be its own company. They spin it out.
Yeah.
And then it's, a separate competitor, and that could be something that's explored. I don't think it would be like an AWS spinoff because it doesn't really have any bearing on the argument they made. But
Yeah.
I think that logistics would be a big part of it.
I wonder how Shopify factors into this, because effectively the pitch on Shopify is we can give any seller Amazon-like payment and shipping and fulfillment capabilities. And would Amazon be able to point to them and say, what do you mean monopoly? Spotify is right there, based in Canada. But millions of merchants all over the place utilizing their services. We compete with them.
I guess the flip side of that would be, well, why can't a merchant on Amazon using it to get customers use their Shopify shipping to fulfill the 2-day promise and stay in Prime, right? If they're so good.
The case about Alphabet paying Apple billions of dollars for Google to be the default search engine on the iOS ecosystem's browsers, it actually went against the tech giants, and there is going to be a remedy, and we don't know exactly what it's going to be. Wall Street has weighed in by selling off shares of Alphabet because it looks like they're not going to be able to maintain their hold, or at least pay to maintain it the way that they were. So this case against Amazon and its outcome absolutely is going to have a big impact, especially in a worst case scenario. I know it's early, but how do you think this thing ultimately plays out?
Well, it's interesting. The book makes a lot of comparisons between Jeff Bezos and John Rockefeller of Standard Oil. And I think Amazon...
in the first chapter, you start down that road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what happened with Standard Oil, and there's just so many similarities, it's kind of crazy. What happened with Standard Oil is John Rockefeller fought a breakup of Standard Oil tooth and nail. He did not want his company to be broken up. In 1911, the Supreme Court breaks it up into 34 different
20
companies.
years after the antitrust suit started.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it winds up being the best thing to ever happen to John Rockefeller or Standard Oil, because all of those companies separated from each other become behemoths in their own right, and some of them quadruple in stock market value. Okay.
Yeah.
And he's wealthier beyond compare. And I think that there could be an analog here with Amazon that, they're resisting a breakup. This conglomerate model serves them very well. They're one of the last conglomerates that actually works because they're able to leverage their power with their vendors and their competitors and the people they compete against to great effect. But I think if it were to be broken up, it might even be a Standard Oil sort of scenario where it unleashes more value.
So I love that idea. I think a lot of people are starting to talk about, they think about the problems at Alphabet. Well, what if YouTube were a standalone business? So the Baby Bells, which were spun out of AT&T when that was broken up, that was done along regional lines.
Mm-hmm.
They basically created the Northeast and the Southeast and the Southwest, and each of those became standalone companies. And then they all remerged with other companies anyway, to the point where they basically don't exist anymore. I don't know exactly how Standard Oil, along which lines those pieces were broken up. I feel like it was Texaco and
Exxon is one of them.
Exxon.
Mobil's one of them, right?
But was that regional too, or was that?
I think some of it was regional, but not all of it. There was Standard Oil of New Jersey, for instance, that became its own thing. But and then some of them wound up merging again later. Chevron was originally a Standard Oil company, right?
I guess the question is if Amazon were to contemplate, I guess if a breakup were forced on them as the ultimate remedy, and then maybe they fought that for 5 or 10 years. But what if, let's say, they acceded to it and they said, you know what, you're right, we'll break up. We don't want to deal with this anymore. Along what lines? You separating the third party marketplace business from the first party business, or we're taking the Lord of the Rings show and spinning that out into its own, what I can't even imagine what the different permutations could be, but I feel like there could be so many of them.
I mean, this is 12 different publicly traded companies in one company. Their advertising arm, the retail arm, cloud computing, logistics, movie studio, you name it, right?
Yeah,
it's just
it could be
literally
anything.
everywhere. Kuiper's coming online now, right? That's another business that's going to compete with SpaceX. So there's just so many different ways you could hypothetically chop it up. But, if you read the FTC lawsuit, that's really focused on like one area. So I'd imagine like logistics could be a big part of that.
Okay. You mentioned Kuiper, so let's end with that, and then we'll tell people where they can get the book to read more. This is going to be the head-to-head battle. I think they launched 127 satellites last week or 2 weeks ago. They want to have their own version of Starlink. I think it's great for the world and for the consumer for it not just to be Starlink. Like I think having at least two players there offering internet service. And so it's going to be somebody versus Tesla or somebody versus Elon Musk. Amazon versus Elon Musk sounds like it even has a shot. Do you think that this is going to be a really interesting battle? Do you think that this is gonna be kind of like a mano a mano Musk versus Bezos, even though Bezos isn't the CEO per se of Amazon right now?
He's executive chair still, so he's still very much involved. This is something very much like that was part of like Jeff's vision here. It deals with space, which is one of his like big areas. I think it's really fascinating because for a very long time, Starlink has been the player in this space, no pun intended. And to see Amazon come online, I mean, later than they wanted to, I think it could, we could see some big ramifications here. So it's kind of exciting to watch.
Yeah, Prime users having a discount for internet service as like an introductory way to build market share sounds like it's really going to make the SpaceX folks not very happy with having that as a competitor. So if they can get the capacity online and get more of, I think they said they want to have like 1,200 satellites in the sky in the next 2 years or something like that. It sounds like it's going to be the next battleground.
Timing's interesting too, because it comes right as Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk sort of settled their years-long pissing match, or Elon would really criticize him online a lot about Blue Origin, his space rocket company. So
settled it at least for now. All right. So I want to send people to where they can get the book because I've been an Amazon shareholder forever, but I learned so much just going back through some of the old stories. And your reporting is really, I mentioned to you before we started recording, it seems like you've had 1,000 conversations with people about this company in order to write this book. It's just so well done, and there's so much in here that I think most people haven't heard before or didn't fully understand. So I wanted to congratulate you on the Everything War.
Thank you.
And I asked you before, like, what was the most exciting feedback that you got? You mentioned the company was like not as combative about what you wrote and what you published.
Well, I was very methodical in that. I spoke to 600 people and I had hundreds of pages of internal documents to bulletproof it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's incredible. And I want people who are looking for their next great business book to strongly consider The Everything War. Dana, thank you so much for coming by and chatting with me. I really appreciated it. And hope we talk again.
Thanks for having me.